Start.
No. Introduce yourself.
Hello, everybody. This is Jason Whitney. I'm at the weekly 3Believe Wellness Program. I'm glad you're here. Hope you got your water. I got mine ready for any parched moment that may come up. It's guaranteed it's going to come up. You just got to make sure that you're hydrated, right? So today we're going to talk about preaching. We're going to talk about what is it that we preach. What is the doctrine, if you will, that we talk about? Because we talk about a lot of topics. So what really is our message? That's what we're going to go over today. So welcome, everybody. Let's get started in our program. And, well, you're going to find out exactly what it is that we preach. We'll just get things going. If you can hear me, as usual, please, over on the right side of the screen, just type in a little message. Type in a message that you can hear me, that you can see me, and then I'll know that the message is going out there for everybody in internet land. So glad you're here. We're gonna go over some good content and good information. So let's get started. As I mentioned, we talk about the weekly, our 3Believe Wellness Program. And we talk about a lot of different topics. And in the topics that we talk about, we can sometimes be a little bit, be a little bit confusing about what it is that we actually are trying to say and what it is that we're trying to the message that we're trying to deliver. So let me tell you a little bit about my past or my present. I'm a food scientist, and I specialize in chronic disease and metabolic syndrome. I've been doing that for the last 11 years, teaching doctors and physicians how to overcome the symptoms of metabolic syndrome and chronic disease, things like obesity and heart disease and diabetes. There's a lot of doctors growing, thankfully, the number of doctors that don't want to treat with traditional medications and surgeries. They want to do a more holistic approach, and that's what and why we're here. So the reason why we started with doctors is because most people, when they don't feel well, their body's sending them a message, they go to their doctor. And the CDC says that the U.S. population of Americans, as great as we are, we're not as great as we could be, because nearly 80% are overweight. 37% have high cholesterol. 46% of Americans have high blood pressure. 15% are diabetic, and that's just those that we can diagnose. There's more walking around that are undiagnosed diabetics. That's a tragedy. And up to 32% have fatty liver disease. Now, a little bit of a hint, that's where metabolic syndrome starts, is a fatty liver. And then everything cascades from there. This is an old number. 75% of deaths of all Americans occur by chronic disease. And so it's a sad statistic, one that we don't want any of our neighbors, our friends, our family members to be a member of, is a person that has a chronic disease. If you look amongst your coworkers and your neighbors and your family members, or if you just look out at the airport or at a convention or at the fair, sadly, too many of those people, just visually, you can tell, have at least one chronic disease. So our message that we talk about, if you were to boil it down, is I want you to eat a healthy ratio of FPC. Very simple doctrine. It's about fats, about proteins, about carbohydrates. That's the FPC message. And since that's the place where we get our calories from, if we have that balance out of whack, if it's in the wrong place, meaning of our calories that we're getting in a day, some are going to get 1,200 calories and some are going to get 3,000 calories. The secret is not really the calories that you're eating or the number of those calories. It's where those calories are coming from. How many are coming from carbohydrates, how many from proteins, and how many of those calories are coming from fats. Food, you got to admit, we all eat it. It's killing us. Is it healing us? That's the question we need to ask. FPC is a very simple procedure. Just change your ratios around. Change your carbohydrates from 51%, which is the average American's consumption, down to 12 or 22. Major things will happen that will improve your health. It's more important than exercise. It's more important than supplements. I do both. And the bottom line is, if we can have more of a balance of the green zone here of the FPC, your life is going to be a much, much better place. It's going to be a happier place. You're going to think more clearly. You're going to perform better. You're going to be a better boss. You're going to be a better employee. You're going to be a better father, a better mother. You're just going to be a better you. So the message is change your FPC ratio and you will change your health. Absolutely. That's what I did. Started out 11 years ago. I was a chubby guy at 280 pounds, had over 10 chronic diseases, things like high blood pressure and elevated glucose levels, as pre-diabetic. I had a terrible gut biome. I had headaches every day. The list just went on and on. My doctor wanted to give me 6 medications. Instead, I treated the source of the problem after 12 weeks of the same thing that I tell you about. I didn't have any symptoms. I didn't need the medications. And I've been able to keep my weight off, keep those symptoms away for over 11 years. So that's the message that we teach. And that's what you can be part of. So last week we talked about, for example, collagen proteins. And then the previous week we talked about that was about ketogenic and inflammation. We talked about arthritis the week before that. And so we talk about a lot of different things. So people may ask, what in the world is it that we preach? What is the message that we're trying to get across? Now, there are some, not all, I realize this, but there are some preachers out there that they do it just for the money. It's a great place for people to call in for a prayer or for a healing. Call in, donate some money, and I'll call down the powers of heaven. And there's been movies about it. There's been songs and stories, and they're not alone in wanting to take your money. The nutrition industry is loaded with companies and so-called experts and people that are opportunistic, and all they're trying to do is, well, they get money. I heard a new podcast just the other day from a young girl. It was actually an interview of a young girl. She was 13 years old, and she had started a website. She started a weekly webinar, and the program is about how you can be successful in business at any age. Don't let age be the determining factor of your success. And the message was not talking about her product, which happened to be vitamins and minerals. And through the message, it just came out very clear. I'm not saying that anything about that you can't be young and be an expert, but at 13 years old, it was clear that she had not spent too many of her informed years of being an expert in nutrition. She admitted she just went out on the internet and found a company to make the product. Then she made statements like, it doesn't really matter where you get your vitamins from. Just put your own label on it. There's so many companies out there that'll do that for you because they're all the same. Well, you and I both know they're not all the same. But what I found interesting is that the message that she was giving, people are more than willing and able to supply. Here is a 13-year-old girl. After, I think it was after 3 months, she had $1 million sales funnel online, bringing in huge amounts of revenue. She didn't have a manufacturing facility. She didn't have a degree. She didn't have any expertise. She was giving people what they want. So the nutritional industry is not without those that are just trying to capitalize on people seeking health and wellness. And so, what are the message that we talk about? Well, you hear me talk about chronic disease. Well, what is a chronic disease? A chronic disease is anything that that you have that is debilitating, that is chronic, that will last for more than 3 months. So, for example, if you have high blood pressure, this weekend I took the family to Fish Lake in Utah, and we caught a fish. Actually, I didn't catch a fish. 12-year-old girl caught the fish. I didn't catch a fish, but my heart rate elevated. That's not a chronic disease. Now, if my heart rate or my blood pressure, I should say, elevates for 3 months, then it becomes a chronic disease. So anything that you have, things will go up, blood sugar levels will go up, and blood sugars will drop. Blood sugar elevated for 3 months is then can become a chronic disease. And so we talk about those type of topics. You've heard me talk about diabetes and talk about how sugars can be a problem. Elevated sugars or high sugar foods, how it's one of the precursors of chronic pain, and how fats and sugars together cause a saturated fat problem. How it can cause eye problems, and the list goes on. You've heard me talk about arthritis just last week, osteoarthritis, gout, which is a form of our arthritis. We talked about skeletal issues and the bone issues and degenerative and inflammation. You've heard me talk a lot about obesity and dieting, being overweight and the risks that happen to that. You just heard me give a statistic that talked about 80% or almost of Americans being overweight, and how you've heard me talk about how damaging that is. So you've heard me talk about all these issues like cholesterol, and you've heard me talk about the cost of these chronic issues. For example, in America, 3 out of every $4 spent in healthcare is spent on chronic disease. So it's where most of our money goes. If you have a chronic disease, on average, you'll spend an extra $7,900 on that disease. Even with health insurance, chronic conditions can pose a significant financial burden, particularly when it affects your work, because you don't get to work as frequently. You got to take more time off. Bankruptcies in the U.S. are the number one cause, bankruptcies are caused first and foremost by medical expenses. And since every third dollar out of that 4 that's being spent is chronic disease, it's a big deal. Healthcare costs for one person with 1 or more chronic conditions are 5 times higher compared to an individual that has no chronic disease at all. So if I can talk about ways for you to overcome your chronic disease, I'm saving you 5 times what you'd otherwise spend. That's a moneymaker. That would be a great sales pitch line, right? You're not spending money, you're saving 5 times what someone otherwise would spend. The cost of chronic disease is one reason why I talk about it. And since chronic disease are becoming so frequent and long lasting, people with a chronic disease are also at a very high risk of depression, just not being happy. They have higher levels of anxiety, and marital and family discord and problems surface around people more predominantly with a chronic disease. And then they can also spin into other financial problems, right? So why do I talk about chronic disease? Well, about 25% of people with a chronic disease have some type of activity restriction. They're not able to move as frequently. They can't go hiking like this weekend. We went fishing, we went hiking. At one point, we rented a pontoon boat, right? And one of the things that happens when you this late in the season is moss grow out in the lake, and you drive your boat through it. Some of it just breaks away and it's just free floating in the water. And if it gets in your propeller, if you've ever studied boats on water with cavitation, you know that when something gets in your propeller, you'll just sit there and cavitate, meaning that your propeller spins, it's just whipping around air in the water and you're not going forward. Well, we were out in the middle of the lake. I was doing this yoga pose, stretching, reaching clear out over the end of the motor to reach down and get the moss off of the propeller. Of course, I turned it off. But it was very difficult. And I'm in shape. I'm in great shape. I don't have excess weight around my stomach that would restrict me from being able to bend down, twist, and turn. I had to place my foot in a weird pose. It was kind of like that game. What's that game called? Where you spin the dial and you touch the blue dot and you touch the orange dot, and there's two people on this pad. For heaven's sakes, I can't remember that game. And you twist all around, and it's the person that falls down is the loser, right? It was like that out on the lake. And with chronic diseases, because of restriction or strength or too much fat around our midsection, we just can't do the same things that other people without those issues can and are able to do. People with chronic disease are at the highest risk of medical errors. Now, this is something that a lot of people don't think about. The higher the more medical experiences that you have, visits to your doctor, prescriptions that you get, it's just the law of averages that you're going to have a higher chance of something going wrong. The doctor writing down the wrong type of medication or procedure. You hear about these tragedies all the time. A person goes in to have their right arm amputated because of disease, and they made a mistake on the chart, and they removed the wrong arm. That's terrible. Someone just text me, thank you. The name of that game is Twister. Yeah, Twister. Those that have chronic disease don't play a lot of Twister. So if you don't want to have medical errors, you want to avoid chronic disease. Another issue of why I spend so much time talking about these different topics that surround chronic disease is because most disability and premature deaths in the United States are caused by a chronic disease. Things like diabetes and cancer and heart disease. Now, we've become such that we think that that's all part of life and that's all part of aging. It's not. It's a complete fallacy. It's a lie. That is the net result of having a chronic disease. And if you catch a chronic disease soon enough, it's completely, absolutely, the tests are out. The studies have confirmed that it is avoidable. You don't have to live it, right? Chronic disease causes 7 out of every 10 deaths. You heard me talk about that earlier. 1 in 3 children born today. And this is a terrible tragedy. This is another reason why I talk about chronic disease. 1 in 3 children born today will develop diabetes in their lifetime. Half of Latino children have that issue. It's not because that's fate. That's because, sadly, we as parents are creating diabetics amongst our children. We are literally making that happen. It's the food that we feed them at school. It's the treats we give them after the basketball game. It's the treats that we give them when they're out on the boat fishing. It's the foods that we give them without any management at all. We are creating this issue amongst our youth. Obesity in adults have doubled in the last 20 years. Just 20 years. We're not talking about 200 years or a century. 20 years it's doubled, and it's tripled in children ages 2 to 11, right? 3 times higher in our children, and more than tripled in children from ages 12 to 19. So it's tripled in children right down to little babies, right on up to when they're 19 years old. Overweight and obesity are the biggest public health threats of this entire century, causing unprecedented increases in rates of diabetes and heart disease, osteoarthritis, among all the other issues that we've talked about. This is the reason why I spend so much time on it. Now, you've heard me also talk about keto. So what do we preach? You've just already heard me talk about so many things. Well, we talk about the ketogenic diet and the benefits of it. We talk about insulin levels and controlling them, and how if we don't watch out for this master hormone, we got all kinds of problems. We're going to spend a lot more time in front of our doctor and inside the hospital. You've even heard me talk about microbiome, about that good and bad gut bugs. That's kind of hard to say really fast. Gut bugs in your stomach, right? Science has talked about that every single chronic disease starts first in the gut. It starts there and then spreads to the rest of our body. And when we start getting terrible symptoms. You've heard me talk about omega fats. You've really heard me talk about the importance of balancing out the consumption of our omega-3s in comparison to our omega-6. Omega-6 is a great omega oil. We need to have it. And yet we get too much of a good thing and it's bad for us. And we get currently about 23 times too much omega-6, too much of a good thing, and we don't get enough omega-3. So we need to balance that out. And you've heard me talk about the advocates, or the how we are an advocate of omega-3. Intermittent fasting. If you've listened to this program at all, I've given several courses on the benefits and technique of intermittent fasting. It seems like we don't know what we're talking about. Now, even in religion, let's just take the Christianity, for example. They have 10 commandments, the famous 10 commandments of Moses going up on the Mount Sinai and bringing down the commandments for all of us to follow. But I found this interesting. Just in the New Testament, not the Old Testament, but just in the New Testament, it gives 1,050 commandments under 800 different headings. We don't have 10 commandments. We have over 800 commandments if you're following Christianity. And I wouldn't be surprised, though I haven't done the research, that other religions would be very similar. So I'm following the same suit that even something as needed and important as religion. We don't just have one message to give, but they all point towards one good common thing, which is wellness. Now, in the Bible talks about our spiritual wellness. In 3Believe, we talk about your wellness in your physical body. And that has its impact on your spirit and your soul, doesn't it? On your cognitive well-being. But that's the message that we are. Who is 3Believe? We're all about wellness. We're not about one particular thing, because they do cross over. Now, you don't hear me talk about everything. All kinds of some of the popular things that are out there, because I feel that they don't have a gigantic, not that they're not important, but they don't have a huge impact on your overall wellness. So the message that I'm trying to give, and who we are and what we're talking about, who is 3Believe, if you were to just give it a summary, well, we talk about diet, and that not that carbs are evil and bad and you never need to taste them again, because they're delicious and they're wonderful. Just not too much of a good thing, because carbs will have a tremendous impact on your insulin levels. A recent study just talked about one of the primary causes of Alzheimer's. It talks about it's not a diabetic disease, even though some want to rename it and call it type 3 diabetes, or some want to recall it diabetes of the brain. Well, even diabetes itself is not a glucose or a carbohydrate disease. It's an insulin problem. You die from long-term exposure to elevated glucose levels, not because of the glucose levels. You die from diabetes because of long-term exposure to insulin. Insulin long-term at high levels will kill your organs. And that's what they're saying about Alzheimer's, is that it's a flooding of constant insulin to the brain cells that cause them to die. And so we talk about the diet and its impact on carbohydrates only because of its impact of insulin. We talk about fats. We talk about omega-3 because it's a huge impact on your blood. And the last recent study found that, blood, you got to have it. If you don't, you die. So we have to have good, healthy blood. You've heard me talk about microbiome. Why? Because every chronic disease starts there. And that's an easy cure. I don't have a microbiome medicine or product or cure. And that's why I say that word. That's something that you can do all by yourself by just getting a balanced microbiome. Now I can help you with guides and remedies and products to help point you in that direction. But my products, you'll never hear me talk about my products will cure you. But you go out there and you balance out your microbiome, you can cure through those kind of methods. So we talk about the importance of our microbiome. You've heard me talk about fasting. Intermittent fasting does all kinds of wonderful things. One of the main things it does is autophagy. And that's where your body will go and it'll take up those broken and used out and defective proteins that are no longer acting like a proper protein, almost like a zombie type protein, and they cause havoc. They cause problems in your body. You do autophagy. You don't have to take medication. You don't have to go in and have a machine treated. You just fast, and your body will go and chew up and use those cells, break them down, and discard them and get rid of them. That is a fountain of youth. And that's something that we've talked about, the importance. That's the message, or the doctrine. That's one of the commandments that you've heard me talk about. And the keto diet, all by itself, it's not enough. The bottom line is, in fact, talking with a physician or scientist that delve deeply into microbiome and the gut bacteria says keto diets are one of the worst diets for gut health. So is that a reason to stay away from ketogenic diets or low carb diets? Absolutely not. It is if you follow the popular keto diet, where all it focuses on is high protein, moderate fat, and that's it. Stay away from carbs. Well, you got to remember that with carbs can come healthy gut bacteria that will help your microbiome. It's not the only place you can get it. You can get it in other places, but that's a popular one. And so that's why this scientist is saying that keto diets are some of the worst gut producing patients that they've ever seen. So our program talks about, let's take the benefits of a ketogenic diet, controlling those insulin levels and all the other benefits that come along with it, but also fix the gut problem. Now you've got a keto hybrid. And that's what you've heard me talk about, why it's important. Our approach is taking the benefits of the ketogenic diet, and let's just take it up another notch and give you the ultimate wellness program. And so we talk about ketogenic because the net sum gain of it is that it's an easy solution. You can do it on a tight budget. You can do it on a tight time factor that you have. You can do it and still be satisfied with the foods that you're eating. And so those are the reasons why we talk about these topics like we do. So if you hear me talking about our website and what we have to offer, and I tell you to go to www.3believe.com, check out what we have. We are something different. Forgive me for providing you with things like products that make it easier. We are not the only way. Our products are not the only way for you to be able to control your gut biome and lower your inflammational levels and increase your autophagy, that's getting rid of those radical proteins and getting rid of headaches and lowering your blood pressure and all those things that you've heard me talk about. So many different doctrines, messages. The preaching could have been misunderstood. But now I want you to hopefully see that it's all really talking about the same thing. And that is, let's control the key factors of our body. We got to control our digestion. That's where the microbiome. We got to control our pancreas and our liver. And you've heard me talk about those three organs, our pancreas, liver, and our gut, our stomach, our digestive system. You focus on those things and most all your other problems just simply go away. These products that we provide just make it simpler. It doesn't mean that you can't live healthy without them. It just makes it easier. And in most cases, it makes it less expensive. As an added benefit, as you share the message with your family and friends, and even with strangers, it can be a great cure to financial issues. So because we share with you, you're an affiliate partner where you can actually make an income off of sharing the message and being an advocate for those messages. And that helps people be able to cure some of their financial issues. And so the doctrine that we talk about and who 3Believe is it's really a very simple message. We're not bouncing all over the board, and you won't hear me selling products that don't fall into those areas. Everything that we provide, the messages and the products, the material will all focus down into the wellness of your life and the wellness of your being and your experience here on earth. So in case any of you are just wondering who in the world we are, what it is, the message, why do we talk about so many different things, is to clear up some of the propaganda that's out there, some of the hyperbole, and some of the things that just aren't based in science. And that's why I give you so much backing and knowledge fortification of the clinical studies. I want you to know that this is not an opinion that I give you. These are scientific proven topics and messages that will benefit your life. So 3Believe, we're all about you. We're all about the wellness of your life, and hopefully you get some benefits out of it. I'll keep coming back at you with more and more research. I've got some great things that we've been researching coming up, talking about different topics, and I hope that you find them as exciting as I do. So I'll talk to you later. Thank you very much. Any diabetics or any people suffering from chronic issues that, you've seen them not be as happy and mobile as you think that they ought to be, well, share the message. I can guarantee you that we have something here at 3Believe that they'll find favor with. So thank you again. We love you. God bless you, and take care.